We think about 1,700 died on the march. The remainder would find themselves shipped on to London and to Southampton, and from there many of them would eventually be shipped overseas, largely to the Americas and to the Caribbean. It was not unusual for large groups to be transported instead of facing prison or the gallows. The Dunbar transportations, at least 4,500 men were pardoned for the colonies between 1661 and 1770. And it wasn't just men. Women and children too had a value, not least as a means to persuade male colonists to remain where they were, to marry, to settle down, to create the connections and ties that hold people to a particular piece of land. Very often it was a 2-for-1 offer. You would get a man taking on a maid who would pay £121 of tobacco for the privilege, but would have an apprentice, usually a child, thrown in for only another 20. It's estimated that between 1620 and 1775, some 300,000 free willers, those who had indentured themselves as servants, arrived in the Americas in this way, accounting for 2 out of 3 migrants from the British Isles. The transportation of Scots prisoners was to be repeated after the Battle of Worcester in 1651, when 8,000 more were taken captive. The Council of State instructed the Committee for Prisoners to grant a license to send these men to the West Indies. Here, the crop was sugar rather than tobacco, equally valuable and requiring equally back-breaking labour. Indenture was meant to be time-limited, but the Dunbar men were dependent on the goodwill and honesty of their employers. They had little recourse if they weren't freed at the end of their agreed time. We know of one group of Scots sent to the West Indies after the Battle of Worcester, who complained in 1656 that their indentures had been illegally extended. The London Committee of Inquiry, which investigated their complaint, actually upheld their sentences rather than releasing them. It was a dangerous business just getting to the Americas. Shipboard mortality rates for forced transportees have been estimated at between 15 and 30%. Nor did conditions necessarily improve when they landed. Within a 5-year period after arrival, around 35% of women and 50% of men shipped out as indenturees would find themselves dead between 1620 and 1680.